recording, so I'm not sure. There we go. All right. Thanks so much for inviting me. My name's Deborah Buffalin, and I am from the Hopkins Office for Undergraduate Research. There you can see it behind me. I hope that from my talk today and from talking to each other about your research experiences, what you'll find is that there is a thriving undergraduate research community at Hopkins where you can get help and encourage each other in your efforts, but also by reaching out to the staff and resources at Our, you can find all kinds of help with deciding what kind of research you might want to do, finding great, meaningful opportunities, finding funding, that's a good one, and navigating all of the obstacles that might pop up that come in between you and a really wonderful research experience. And also, importantly, how to communicate what it is that you've managed to accomplish with your research experience, presentation, and other opportunities. So what I'm going to do is just go over a brief history of research for undergrads at Hopkins super quick, and what role the Our office plays in making sure that you guys have a great experience. Then just quickly look at some of the resources that are available, just so that it isn't all new to you as you're approaching the website or any of the other resources that we have. And then I understand we're going to have a panel discussion with some researchers who are in this group. So that's really terrific. I'm always excited to hear from the students what they're doing, and then a Q&A. So first I'd like to ask, and I didn't have an opportunity to make a poll, so maybe we can just do it with a thumbs up or any other symbol if you have already engaged in research as an undergraduate at Hopkins. So a lot of the upper class, terrific. And somebody can clear those off. Are you interested in engaging in an undergraduate research experience sometime before you graduate, even if you have not yet? Thumbs up. Okay, so what we find through the admissions office, through surveying students on their way into the university, and what's called first destination survey. We ask you questions after you've been away from Hopkins for about a year. Why did you come to Hopkins? 80% of the students say research in the first sentence. They come because it's an R1 research university. It's the oldest research institution in the United States. It's the most well-funded research institution in the United States. And that's a big part of why folks come here. So I'm going to go ahead and start my formal presentation so you'll learn a little bit more about what the resources are that are available. And what I'd like to ask is, if you have a question, go ahead and pop it into the chat, and I will try to look at it periodically, or if one of the organizers sees something that's really like topical at that very moment, just unmute and ask it, and I'll try to get it in. Otherwise, we can just save the questions for the end. All right. Is everybody seeing this PowerPoint? Great, thank you. All right, woohoo, all about Our. So it is important to understand that research has always happened and it has always included undergraduates at Hopkins, but until fairly recently, it was a very informal experience. Students came, they go to classes, they meet faculty, they meet RAs, they meet their classmates, they walk down a hallway, they see something interesting, they reach out, and through various forms of informal communication, students have always found research opportunities. It's important to know, though, that informality can sometimes be the enemy of equity, right? So if people are finding connections through networking, or they happen to have extra time, or they don't need to have a job, and so they have time that they can use to go chat with faculty, they're going to have more opportunities than students who don't have those advantages. So we felt it was really important to make sure that all resources were available to all students, and to kind of level the playing field so that any student who wants a meaningful research opportunity should be able to find one. The Our office is fairly new, created in 2017. Tracy Smith, who's the director, was the sole person. She had been working for Denis Wertz, who is the vice provost for research. And he saw that she had a real affinity for and affection for the undergraduates, and that somebody needed to be working on making sure undergraduates had a great experience. And that's how the office got started. At this point, we have 2 people, so we've doubled the size, and that means we can work with twice as many students. And because of the pandemic, silver lining for us, we were pushed into an entirely virtual setup, and that meant that we actually reached way more students starting in the summer of 2020 than Tracy had ever been able to do before. By the way, if I look familiar to any of you upperclassmen, I actually have already put in 20 years at the Digital Media Center before moving to Our in 2020. So you might recognize me from there. So I've always worked with undergraduates. I love connecting students to great opportunities. We can talk about the future of Our some other time. So the whole purpose of having an office is to make sure that there are formal ways for students to find their way on their research path. Again, formality is not the enemy of friendliness. Formality means that there's ways that everybody can have access to that are known and quantifiable and accessible and available. So by having an office now for undergraduate research, you no longer have to rely on finding the right RA or being brave enough to send out that email and so forth. Instead, or in addition to that, there are other methods like using the Forager1 database, which I think a lot of the upper class who are at this meeting have already used and found great mentor relationships by starting with Forager1 as their entry point. The other things that Our is working on, in addition to very obvious direct resources that we're making available to undergraduates, is we're really working on cultivating a culture at the university where undergraduates aren't just sort of an afterthought. I know that throughout your days, most of the people that you deal with at Hopkins are totally invested in you and your future and how you're doing, your well-being. But sometimes those really great research faculty that you'd like to be dealing with, to them, you're not even on the radar, right? They've got their projects, they've got their funding, they've got their postdocs, they've got their graduate students, their master's students, and maybe occasionally they might teach a class, maybe not. And so really their interactions with undergraduates are few and far between, and we're trying to really make sure that undergraduates always have a seat at the table whenever faculty or administrators are talking about research, including during the pandemic when people were writing up rules and regulations about what students were allowed to do. And it turns out they were talking about grad students. And we're like, what about undergrads? So just, really speaking for the undergrads. We also are trying to cultivate a peer-to-peer organization. And so that's where we are on campus groups. We've got a group, I hope that you're all members of it. At this point, we haven't really given you a whole lot of reason to be members. We're not really doing a whole lot there, but we did start a little forum where you can post questions and answers. We'd like to see that get a little bit more active. We'd like to see students who are interested in fostering that particular organization maybe serve as an advisory body for Our itself. Another area where we're trying to foster some mentoring and some help for students is with the alumni community. So right now there's a platform called OneHop, and you guys can start using it at any time, reaching out to alumni who are interested in talking to students like you to improve your experiences. Another thing that we're really working hard on right now is money. Money is important. So generally, while you're in your fall and spring semesters, many students will expect to do some research, generally maybe 6 to 10 hours a week. 8 seems to be the nice average. And that's a large percentage of the student body, and they will be uncompensated for that. So it's just something that you add to your burden You have classes, you have schoolwork, you have leadership opportunities, you have fun things, you have sleep, occasionally having a shower, but then you're gonna have a research burden if that's the path that you're on. Some students will manage to get academic credit for some of those experiences, and there are lots of limitations and rules in which academic credit happens. But for the most part, during the fall and spring, students are uncompensated for these experiences. It's in the summer that we're really trying to push for an understanding that students, if they are not offered compensation, some students will be at a significant disadvantage because they are expecting to have to earn some money in order to make it through the next school year or to pay debts from the previous school year. And it is just inherently inequitable to not have paid, compensated summer experiences. So we're really working on putting together pockets of money so that we can provide the support that students need to do unpaid research in the summer. So that's something we're really pushing as hard as we can right now. And also just in general, not every student who says that they need some help needs to actually find a mentor. There may be other things that come up. They may needs to know how do they get hooked up with a professional organization, or they're looking for something outside the university, or they're having some sort of an HR kind of issue at their position. So we try to help with just about anything that can be in the universe of undergraduate research. This just tells you all of our social media stuff. We do know that 80% of undergraduates who are here now will engage in research at some point during their time here. The average amount of time is 8 or 9 hours a week. And we just hope that you'll take advantage of our office. Now I'm going to give you a really quick overview. Well, first, what is research at Hopkins? Well, you guys are in MAPS, so we know where you're all thinking that you're headed. And it is true that when we speak, sometimes we use the language of the lab when we're talking about research, because it's so easy to talk about PI and science and wet lab and so forth. But it's really important to understand that at an R1 university, or really just about any quality university in the world, when you're talking about research, it's happening across every academic discipline you can think of. And yes, archaeology, fine arts, research happens in every discipline. And just because you're in a particular major or headed toward a particular graduate school or career path does not mean that your research experience needs to be in some sort of a tight funnel or tight tunnel. You really can be looking and exploring way afield of your academic path. All right, so I'm gonna go through this fairly quickly. I know I talk fast, so if anybody has a question, if one of the organizers will let me know, that'll be great. But I want to point out that everything that I'm going to tell you, you can find on our website, which is research jhu.edu/hour. But if you just Google JHU hour, you'll find us. And it's really just a step-by-step. Oh, you want to do research? Here are things to think about. Oh, you're ready to look for a mentor? Here are things to think about. Oh, you're ready to reach out to your mentor? Here are some great do's and don'ts. So if you feel like I'm going too fast, just check it out on our website, or come and meet with one of us, and we'll be happy to help you answer your question or walk you through. So students really need to think about a lot more than, do I want to freeze tissue and make slides and stain them, or do I want to work in a clinical setting, right? So there's a whole universe of things that you need to be thinking about, some of which seem only tangentially related to the research itself. Like, let's say you're a freshman and you're looking for a research experience, probably for next spring, and you have something that comes up that, oh, but it's at the med school campus and they want you on Thursday nights, and you're going to have to take the shuttle over there, and there isn't going to be anybody there when you get there. They're going to give you a J card or the School of Medicine because you have to go feed the mice. Do you want to do that? Do your parents want you to do that? Are you comfortable doing that at this point? So what are your geographic limitations? What are your hours limitations, days of the week that you can work, the kinds of things you like to do? Some students are very, very much opposed to doing animal research, right? So there's all kinds of considerations. So you want to think about those things before you ever even start looking. All right. And then also think about what it is that the mentor might be looking for. Are they looking for somebody who's going to be staying semester after semester and doing the same thing, or staying semester after semester and doing new things? Or do they kind of have a revolving door? Yeah, come in, learn our thing, and then move on. And which do you prefer? Do you want somebody that you're going to have a warm, fuzzy relationship with? Or are you looking for the guy with the big name at the top? And it doesn't really matter if you have a warm, fuzzy relationship, because by golly, you're going to get a great letter, right? So these are all things for you to consider when you're thinking about what you might want to do. I seem to no longer be advancing. There we go. This just reminds you that you should be having a full and healthful life while you're here. We're not intending to torture you. And if research doesn't fit in this semester, let's be realistic about it and plan for another semester. All right. The first place that we're going to ask you to look after you've thought about all of your must-haves and your deal breakers is we're going to ask you to go to a tool called Forager One. Forager One was created by Hopkins undergrads. I think they started working on it in 2018. And of course, we had the pandemic, which slowed things down just a little bit. But they were students just like you who said, why is it so hard to find research? There's thousands of researchers here. There should be a fair and equitable way to do this. And they created this giant database of faculty and PIs, and a way for students to also have a presence in this searchable database. And now you can go in there and you can search for folks. You can search by refining for any of these features that are on the left-hand side, but I always tell people, ignore that. Ignore that, keep your options open. You don't want to limit by division or where in Baltimore this thing is, unless that's a deal breaker for you. You especially don't want to only look for faculty who are actively recruiting or with posted projects, because if a faculty person is in here, unless they have big red letters in front of their name that say currently not recruiting, they are all fair game. They are all available for you to at least ask a question of. And in most cases, once you've introduced yourself and you've talked to them, they're going to be ready to have you come aboard. It's just a part of the job that if you're doing research at Hopkins, you're going to expect that undergraduates are getting in touch with you. So the keyword search box is going to be your best friend, because you're going to ignore those filters on the side, and you're just going to explore, try lots of different combinations, try things you hadn't thought of. Once you get a set of names, though, of folks that you want to talk to, you're going to need to do more research. I call it sleuthing, not stalking. You're going to use all sorts of resources that are listed on our website to do more looking at what these faculty are doing. And you're going to Google Scholar them, and you're going to check out their lab page, and you're going to look at them in the JED directory. That's the thing that's at my.jh.edu, where you can see where is their main appointment and where are all the other places that they also work at Hopkins, and what are all their titles and what does that mean? So you can find out a lot about these faculty by using Forager One to call yourself a list and then do a little sleuthing, and then you're going to communicate with them. All right. Oh, well, this is just more about finding, sleuthing some more information about these faculty. And it's not always just faculty. There are plenty of staff who are PIs. For contacting faculty, we do hope that you'll go through Forager One, but you're also going to follow up with an email from your own JHU email, because we're still getting faculty used to Forager One, and the way they see it is, you've got an email from Forager One, from no reply at Forager One, very inviting. Sure, they're all going to open that. No, So this gives you a chance to reach out to them through Forager One, but then also follow up with an email, which makes you look very organized and proactive. And it also puts your name in front of their face twice. So it's like a freebie. We use a special little formula, and that is 3, she says paragraphs here. It's 3 sentences. A sentence about you, who you are. I'm so-and-so, my year, my major. I'm interested in fill in the blank. And then here comes the interaction that you've had with their stuff. I read your paper. I saw your website. I watched your TED Talk. You came to my class to lecture about fill in the blank, the thing you're interested in. And it's so interesting to me because, so that's sentence 2, but it's got to be real. It's got to be legit. You really need to have at least read the abstract, if not the paper. Do faculty expect you to read their papers and understand them? Everybody tell me. No, you are not a postdoc. You are not a grad student. Many of you are still freshmen or sophomores. They don't expect you to really understand the paper, but it's good if you can maybe exchange a few sentences with your roommate about what the topic is and explain why that's interesting before you ever send an email. Because if you can't do that, you're probably not ready to reach out to this person. Nobody wants to hear just cold from a student. I don't know you and I don't know anything, but will you take me in your lab? No, they want to hear what it is that excited you about their work. And then the third sentence is just simply, can we meet in order to discuss the possibility of my contributing to your project? You don't have to say lab, work at your lab or anything like that. You want to contribute in some meaningful way. That's the magic formula, and it really works, I promise you. You are going to follow up with them because they're unfortunately not going to respond to you right away. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't. And this gives you another chance to look professional and also say things that are very courteous, like, I realize you're very busy. Is there somebody else working on your project, or in your case, in your lab, that I could talk to? That gives them the opportunity to pass you on to a graduate student. Some of you may ask, is that good enough? Yes. So those of you who have already done research at Hopkins, maybe I guess we can't do the thumbs up thing right now because we're not in gallery mode, but you can confirm for me in the chat. Do you really see the stage on the stage very often, or do you mostly work with a graduate student or a lab manager or a postdoc, right? So that is very common that, yeah, it may be that the PI actually nodded and said, yeah, I'll take that kid. But the reality is the person that you see on a regular basis is not that PI. All right. Yeah, we really want you to know what you're talking about and come authentically, and then really be excited about it so that you can present yourself as a desirable candidate. And I'm not even going to talk about the interview because by the time you get to that, you can come and meet with me or drop into office hours, but it's all the usual stuff, you know, really don't be lazy, don't be disrespectful, show up on time. A lot of you will be doing things virtually because as a result of the pandemic, a lot of folks have suddenly realized they don't literally need to schlep across Baltimore to have a meeting. They can just do what we're doing right now. So you have a lot of relaxed standards in that regard. And it's always important to make sure that you know what's expected of you with this opportunity. No two research opportunities are exactly the same. They may expect you to come in every day at 3 o'clock for an hour. Maybe you can't do that. You have classes. Or they may say, I'd like you half a day once a week. Or we do need somebody to feed the rabbits at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Are you that person? Or whatever it is that they need. Make sure you understand all the expectations and that it's something that you can meet. The very, very worst thing that you can do is ghost, right? So you start a conversation with a faculty person and then you just disappear. Don't do that. Or you're having an unpleasant experience, so you just stop going. Don't do that. Right? These are grown-ups. They expect you to be grown-ups. If you have a problem, you just speak about it honestly, frankly, and well in advance so that it's not a problem for them. And if you need any help with that, we're happy to help you practice and give you tips and support you in your endeavor to be just responsible. All right, Tracy, if she were here, she would say, you're going to work your whole life. It shouldn't suck. That's one of her favorite expressions. We realize that this is going to be in publication, so you should love what you do. You already have enough drudgery throughout all the years that you've been in school, and unfortunately, there's probably a drudgery component here at Hopkins as well. Your research experience should not be on the drudgery column. It should be something that you love, that you're excited about, you feel good about. This is just a bunch of resources telling you how great our is, all the things that we can give you, all the funds we have, which aren't very many, frankly, but we're working on it. And also, very important, the Dreams Undergraduate Showcase. Dreams is an annual, it used to be an annual in the spring showcase of research, and then it grew to include scholarly projects, creative projects. So now it's called Dreams, just because if you can dream it and then you accomplish it, you get to present it. So any undergraduate who has done any research, scholarly or creative work, we urge you to present at Dreams. And as it happens, for those of you who are familiar with the old NeuroSci Undergraduate Research Symposium, URS, in the fall, we now own that. And now we're doing Dreams in the fall, Dreams in the spring. So we're just starting to promote Fall Dreams. If you're in the Hour group on Campus Groups, you've already received an invitation to register for that. We're just getting it. There are some changes on the platform. It's all virtual this semester. And so I encourage any of you, and including any freshmen who are here who might have a project that they completed prior to coming to Hopkins, if you have a presentation that you'd like to give on your research, go ahead and register. And you can find it on our website, or just Google Dreams, JHU, and it'll bring you right to the page. And that's going to be October 18th through 22nd, but the 2 days that students are giving live but virtual presentations are the 18th and 19th. So those are the ones where we really need you to be around. All right. And we are trying to be lively on social media, but frankly, we're a bunch of middle-aged ladies. And so, you know, there's just so much we can do with that. Yay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I think it'd be nice if we go all give her a round of applause on Zoom. Awesome. So I think in the interest of time, we might have to save questions till the end. And then right now we'll head right into the research awardee panel. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can go ahead and get started with that. Can all of you guys see my screen? Awesome.
Yes. By the way, sorry that I talked so long.
No, you're totally fine. It was very informative. Awesome. So our first panelist is our co-president, Feven. So I'll give the floor over to Feven.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Feven. If you guys don't know me yet, I'm a junior. I'm one of the co-presidents for MAPS. I'm a double major in Molson Public Health. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. And the first time that I started research at Hopkins was my sophomore spring, so essentially like February of 2020. And the research I started was not the program that I'm doing now, but was with the School of Education for my public health applied experience studying COVID data. My award, or like the program that I'm in, is the circuit program. And essentially, students are paid kind of like what Deborah mentioned in her presentation, $9,000 during the summer. And so that's distributed bi-weekly during the summer months. And then during the school year, we receive research credit for our work, and the work continues. So the program lasts 14 months. So you start in like April. So you're like accepted in the spring, and you start in April, and you do training through April and May. And then you actually like really get into your project during the summer, and then you continue that all the way until the end of the following academic year. So it's 14 months. The application opens November 20th, but I was checking it out earlier, and I'm pretty sure the application's already open, but I would wait till November 20th just to be safe. And so there's 2 deadlines for the application. The priority deadline is 11:59, and then regular is January 31st. And with that, like if you wait until the later deadline, you're less likely, because the priority deadline is like what they review first, and then everyone else comes in as rolling. Next slide, please. Okay, so the circuit program. And the application, they've made some adjustments to it. So they started this like beta program. I think that will go into effect this year, if you can see in the upper right-hand corner picture. But like I mentioned, those are the dates for like training. So you start in like March or April of the year, and then you go through May for spring training, and you don't know your project yet, you don't know anything about that yet. Then the summer session is like the main session where you do 40+ hour work weeks, and then that's when you get paid. And then once school starts in September, you get like a week or so off, and then you go back into doing your work. So essentially, in order to be eligible for this, there's not like any strict guidelines, but it is for students who come from underdeserved backgrounds, or first generation limited income, underrepresented in STEM, or this is like your first opportunity for research experience in college. And what they ask is that all applicants obviously have like an interest in science and research as a whole. Like in the second picture on the right, it shows a bit of the timeline on the application process. So like I said, it opens November 20th, and then those are the 2 deadlines. And then interviews take place between January 20th and February 12th. And then you get to know around March. Usually it's pretty delayed every year, just because it takes them a while to get through all the interviews. And then you start spring training. So some of the requirements, in addition to what's on the main picture of the essay questions and background info, they request an unofficial transcript. And so essentially you could just go into your SIS account and just download it and upload that, which is what I did. And then they ask for your resume. And one thing that I recommend that we'll talk about on the next slide is like VMOC, which really helped me like improve my resume before submitting it, in addition to like the life design lab and going to them for that. So the onboarding process, or like how it works, is once you're accepted and you pass however many interviews you need to, you fill out a cohort interest form. So you get a list of all the different cohorts and different projects you could be a part of, and you essentially fill out like a short I don't know how to explain, like a short quiz, I guess, of like what areas you're interested in, and like provide some feedback. And once you fill that out, they will take that into account, and you rank all the ones that you want to rank. And there's a certain number that you have to rank as a minimum. So you rank all those projects, and then they'll match you to a mentor or like a project. So each project has like at least 1 mentor. And so the projects are a range of sizes. My project is the smallest. It's just me and another person, but there are other projects that have up to 7 students on one task. So it really is diverse in that sense. In addition, we are placed into like what we call BITES challenges. So we have like BITES teams, and it's basically just another way to continue our training. So we do like different challenges, like coding challenges and whatnot. And so it's just a good way to meet other people who are working on different projects in the program, and to like have to work together to complete a common goal. Additionally, there's like a house system in the program. So people who are in your cohort or your project, as well as others, it's usually pretty small, like 10 to 15 max, have like a house, and there's like TAs for graduate students. And so they come and like are like your house TAs, and you basically just like play games and chill and just get to know each other. And it's a nice break during the day. And then additionally, there's in the program professional development. So we do a lot of resume stuff, we do interview, we practice elevator pitches. They have all kinds of speakers come. I believe John Bigelow, who's like in charge of the research and development at the Applied Physics Lab, comes in and like gives a presentation. So it's really a lot that you can get from this program. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just included a sample of my application of one of my essays on the left. And so like the essays are like essentially the main part, and like in my opinion, the hardest part. But on the right, I also included a picture of what a VMOC looks like. So it tells you like what words you're using. It tells you how to fix those. It's basically a computer like software system that all Hopkins students have access to. And you can use it like, I think up to 10 times, like to review 10 different resumes. And it also tells you what it looks like in terms of presentation, competencies, like basically just gives you feedback on how to like rephrase what you have and make it look way better. Next slide. Okay, so quickly, just to cover my work, my project was in precision medicine analytics. And essentially I worked with Andres, who's my partner, and my mentors are Michael and Will is one of the program directors. And essentially what we have is we were given Hopkins Hospital data where we have like, I think around 7,000 to 8,000 patients who have multiple sclerosis. And essentially what we're doing is taking all their data and trying to like create subgroups or like clusters to figure out how their progression will turn, because MS is a very complex disease, and that, like, as you can see on the right in the chart, patients can have all sorts of like relapses and be in all sorts of stages at different times. And so we're just essentially trying to find a way to predict how well that would be, because MRI scans are very expensive. And if you're disabled, it's very hard physically just to get an MRI scan done. So essentially what we're doing is we are trying to figure out the progression of MS so that if a patient, like their MS progresses, like maybe they get one new lesion like every 2 years or something, we can give them more time between their MRI scans to like appropriately like determine if their MS is progressing or not, so that they can like save money, and it also makes it easier for physicians as well. So we're using a lot of data science techniques. So we're classifying patients based on how bad their MS is, and we're clustering them into different groups. And this also involves like data pre-processing and cleaning data, removing outliers, and just like standardizing the data. We also use feature importance plots. So using different factors such as like age of diagnosis obviously plays a role into like how progressed your MS is going to be and that sort of thing. So using that to be able to classify different features that we get from data from patients, as well as like examining like whether one subgroup has like higher MS or like a faster progression of MS in comparison to other subgroups. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Feven. Our next panelist is Rebekah, who is our SNMA liaison.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rebekah. I'm a junior majoring in mole cell and minoring in bioethics. My hometowns are Oregon, Texas, and Maryland, and my first research experience was actually this summer for BDP. A little bit about the Bloomberg Distinguished Professors of Summer program. The award amount is $6,000, and it's 10 weeks over the summer, and the application opens in November. So if you guys want to apply, you have a little bit of time. So the application requires a resume, and again, I like Feven said, VMOC was really helpful for me, and I think the Life Design Lab has like resume workshops that you guys could use. Other than that, it requires a personal statement, and you just like talk about your interests and why a Bloomberg professor would be working with a Bloomberg professor would be beneficial to your interests. And they give you this list. Here's an example on the right side. It's just like a list of the Bloomberg professors that are going to be participating in the summer. And I just went through and like looked at what the projects were, and selected 3 of them that I thought would be good for me. And you have the option to choose 3 from the list and make your application specific to their work and like submit 3 personal statements, or you could submit a general application. But I highly recommend like selecting 3 professors, because I think it's like better on their end to see like, oh, this student is like really interested in me and not just like interested in getting an internship. So yeah, I highly recommend like reading through everyone's work and seeing what they want from you and what you want from them. Next slide, please. So a little bit about my project. I was working in the Green Lab, which is part of the Molecular Biology and Genetics department at the Med Campus. And I was working with a postdoc, Kazuki Saito, and 2 grad students. on this project. So it involves like ribosome rescue pathways in bacteria. And if you look at like part A, this is going to be a lot of like biology, but ribosomes are in our cells and they basically like translate through your mRNA. But if you have a damaged mRNA, like if there's no stop codon or if there's like chemical damage, then the ribosome can get stalled on there. And there are these proteins called tmRNA is a ribosome rescue factor, and its protein partner SMPB in purple and blue there, they like come and attach to the ribosome and split the subunits and then degrade the protein. And that's like the whole pathway that they're studying. But there's also this other protein or an endonuclease called SMRB, which is what the postdoc discovered. And that's in figure B. You can see how it like cuts everything downstream of the stalled ribosome. And the way he found this protein was through a reporter system. So you can see in like slides C and D that he did a selection using TN-seq, which is like transposons, and he did a random knockout library to see if he were to knock out a gene that encodes a ribosome rescue factor, then he could see by like plating cells that have this reporter, and a reporter is like you insert it into a bacterial genome and it can like you can manipulate like how the cells act. So if and you can see there it says sec-M, that's like a stalling sequence. So he puts it into the cell and it like causes the ribosome to get stalled. But if the rescue factors are there, then the ribosome will like split and not be able to continue translating and become resistant to bleomycin, which is this antibiotic. Sorry, this is a lot of just random science, but basically he found SMRB, which is like he found like cells that grew, meaning they got resistant, meaning whatever he like knocked out encoded a ribosome rescue factor, which is how he found SMRB. And then my project was to work with him to like look at different drugs that could help him like find other rescue factors if he wanted to do more reporter systems. But yeah, if you guys are interested, you could come to my dreams presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. The next panelist is Eyad, who is our VP.
All right, so for everyone who's not the biggest wet lab bio fan, this research is for you. Not necessarily, it can also pertain to that as well. But yeah, my name is Eyad. I'm a sophomore majoring in public health, minoring in psych, and you'll see how my research applies to those majors. My hometowns are from Khartoum, Sudan and Doha, Qatar. And I first started research this summer and I actually officially started in person yesterday. So still a lot to unveil. So that's the website for the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, but it's a $10,000 fellowship that's over the 3-4 years that you are a Wilson. The application opens September 20th, so just a couple of days ago, and it closes on February 15th. So you still have a while, but there's a reason why you do have a while. And I'd say, next slide, Armand. I'd say the biggest reason why it takes a while to be able to submit that up until February 15th is mainly because the letter of recommendation, especially for freshmen, it takes quite a bit for you to be able to develop a connection with a faculty member. I believe last year it was 2. I'm not sure if they're making it 1 this year, but you had to get 2 letters of recommendation. And that's also a major reason why we made this panel this early, just so that people can start developing those connections intentionally. But a few of the other requirements are a 150 to 200 word abstract. There's also a proposal that needs to include all of these things. I believe this is pretty similar in terms of some of the other awards, like the Albstein Award that you'll hear about. There's an itemized budget, so they give you a template. Yeah, it's not administered by hour. It's through URSCA. Don't ask me for what that kind of stands for. And then there's also, you have to submit a CV. Same thing as what Feven and Rebecca said, VMOC, life design, hour, they can all help with that. CV is a bit different and that includes a lot more than just that 1-page resume. And then unofficial transcript. But I think the biggest thing here is your letter of recommendation. It's probably the hardest thing to get besides just writing the essays. Next slide, Omar. So a bit more about the Woodrow Wilson application. This is what like an abstract would look like. And I'm probably not going to read it just because of time, but there's certain things that you should be including in your abstract, what you're planning on researching, what previous research was included and like show it very briefly, where the gap in the literature exists, and then how you come in, and then why this matters. And you'll see, like, I originally submitted my abstract talking about adverse childhood experiences and how that affects the prevalence and incidence of different mental health disorders. But the research that I'm doing is slightly different, and I'll go and talk a bit about that after. But next slide, Armand, as well. So this is, so this is my proposal that I submitted, and you can see it's quite long. It is a 2 to 3 page research paper, but you can see how it's broken down into the different parts. So the first page is mainly just the introduction, talking about like what the literature suggests and all the citations and things like that. But then you go on your project design. So that's what you actually want to do. So that's the second portion. And then you include like a timeline of what you plan to do within that time, the 3 to 4 years. And at the end, you just have to talk about your research qualifications. And that can be anything, just showing like your leadership, your exposure into the field and things like that. But yeah, that's mainly the proposal is about. So what I actually do, before I go into that, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what it's like to be a Wilson. So to be a Wilson, what we're called, there's professional development sessions. You get one-on-one mentoring with the Assistant Dean of Undergraduate Research, so Dr. Stroback. There's a lot of movie nights and social events. There's monthly dinners and things like that. We also have dinner with the deans and President Daniels. And then there's also a Wilson presentation and then conferences that you kind of are mandated to go to towards the end of the year. So that's a little bit more about what it's like to be a Wilson. But my research is kind of like twofold. So the major project that I work on is creating a burn atlas to mitigate parental distress from pediatric burn injuries. I probably should have added something about like this image, but hopefully everyone's going to be a doctor and you will have to face seeing these images. But basically, Dr. Parrish, who is my mentor, she kind of did some bit of clinical trials and showed that the biggest source of psychological distress from parents was the fact that they could not see their child's recovery. It's mainly because they feel this immense amount of guilt about what happened. They feel like they're the ones who are who let it happen. So what we're trying to do is develop a scale based off of the Fitzpatrick dermatologic scale to show the progression of recovery depending on like skin color and then how that can provide a medium to reduce parental distress. So that's the first thing. And then the second part of the research that I'm working on, next slide, Armand, is working with the Pediatric Trauma Society to develop a continuum of care for psychological screenings in the ED. And we're actually going to be presenting at a conference in 2 months, a month and a half. That's a conference down there at the Pediatric Trauma Society. And what we're doing is creating a cross-national study, which is like a survey of the prevalence of psychological screenings within the inpatient ED settings. So we're going to be looking at a bunch of different hospitals within Baltimore, like the Hopkins Hospital, Bayview, MedStar, a lot of others, inpatient and outpatient. So specifically looking at burn clinics, analyzing several factors, including like level of trauma center, socioeconomic status, race, and then basically trying to bring attention to this cause. So that's a bit about my research. And the cool thing about Woodrow Wilson is there's no specific limitation to what you can or can't do. Some of the other Wilsons are doing research within like Chinese heritage and how that relates to like in like certain cultural aspects. There's also very like neuro-focused research. There's research related to engineering. So this is the really cool thing about Woodrow Wilson. It's like you can do research within any discipline and then go on about it within like 3 to 4 years, which is pretty cool. So yeah.
Thanks, Eyad. Our next panelist is Annie, who actually works in the lab I work with. So I'll give the floor to Annie.
Thanks, Armand. Hi, so my name is Annie. I'm currently a junior and I'm a major in neuroscience. I first started my research in the spring semester freshman year. And the award that I'm going to talk a little about today is called the Albstein Research Scholar Award. And basically, this is similar to like the Woodrow Wilson, as in it's part of the KSS awards. And basically, the application for both are pretty similar in that aspect, but it's a sort of summer funding type of research. The award amount is about $5,000. Basically, you can use that amount for any living expenses in the summer. Of course, you have to report it. But yeah, this is primarily used to fund individuals who, maybe have some difficulties with the living expenses during the summer or for travel expenses during the school year. And the program length is about 1 year. So you're notified of whether or not you get it around April, and then you have until the April of the next year to present a poster, which is like the end goal. So the application is actually open now, and it closes on February 15th. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So as you can see, this little screenshot here should be pretty familiar, as this was the same application material requirement for the Woodrow Wilson. And for this type of research, the Albstein Award is it's given to individuals who are doing neuroscience or brain-related research in particular. So for this is mostly for individuals who have already had like some kind of foothold in the lab that they're currently in, and they're already working on some kind of project, or they're ready to go independent or something like that. And yeah, so they award about 8 people was what Dr. Strobach told me in the spring. And what really helps for getting all these things down is if you can have at the end of your proposal, have someone in the lab that you work on look over your proposal. This could be the graduate student or the postdoc or even the PI as well, who you work with. And this is because these people are they're used to looking over all these grants and proposals. So that's a really good idea for if you really want to improve your chances. Yep. Next slide. Okay, so I just kind of threw on my example proposal. I know we're a little short on time, so I'll just go through this real quick. So I'm not going to read my proposal, but basically you have your introduction here, and you have your objectives, significance, timeline, and budget. The really key thing for these proposals is to make sure you have a really clear hypothesis. A lot of this is pretty similar throughout the different research proposals you might want to write if you're doing independent research, or you're doing research that you're collaborating with your lab or with your mentor. And yeah, so it might take some time to get through and edit everything. But in the end, even if you don't get the award, I think doing these applications is very fruitful and worthwhile either way, because you'll really gain a greater understanding of the project that you're doing. Yep. Next slide. Okay, great. So something about research is that it's often quite variable. What I just showed on the proposal earlier is completely different from what I'm actually doing right now for research. And the staff who are funding this research at the Krieger School of Arts and Sciences, they're very well aware of that. So this is just a short thing about what I'm doing. So I'm a neuroscience major, so I'm currently doing a lot of neuroscience related work. And sorry. Yep. And what I'm doing right now is a lot of wet lab research about synaptic transmission. So if any of you are familiar with synaptic transmission, on the figure to the left there's a thing that looks like a little bouton. The top one is the presynaptic bouton, and how brain cells or neurons talk to each other is that some kind of electrical potential is fired and they release neurotransmitter. So the question we're trying to answer is, how do these little bubbles move around to where that green line is? And basically we're doing work with a lot of biomolecular components such as intersegment 1, and I'm currently doing some independent work for that. Yep, sorry, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Our last panelist is Sri. So I'll give the floor to Sri.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sri. I'm a junior double majoring in molecular and cellular biology as well as chemistry. I grew up in Tampa, Florida, but I actually went to high school in India. And I started doing research my freshman fall, and I've actually been working in that same lab. And I was able to continue working in that lab over the past summer after I received the Summer Peer Award. So a little bit about this award is that what you do is you do an independent research project with the guidance of a research mentor. And in my case, I was able to, the research mentor was the PI that I've been working with. But if you don't have a research mentor, I'm sure the Our office can help you out with finding one. And if you have a great idea, I'm sure it'll be pretty easy to find someone who wants to help or to work with you. And the application for the Summer Pura opens on November 1st. It closes on February 1st, and the award amount is $6,000. And the program length is about 10 weeks over the summer, and it will be followed by a formal presentation at the DREAMS conference. Next slide. Yeah, so in order to apply to this program, you have to write a small research proposal. And what this is you're kind of just pitching the project you're going to do. So some of the things you're including are the objective or the research question, the significance of the project, the methods and procedures you might have to use, the timeline of the project, of what you're going to use this 10 weeks for, your results, like what the expected outcome of the project is, and what the possible future scope of this project would be. And you can also include some supplementary materials, such as like data or graphs or anything you've done online research for. If you can cite it and include it in your research proposal, and as well as a bibliography. And it's in total should not exceed 4 pages. And in my case, after finding a research mentor, I was able to have her look over my research proposal and kind of help me out with that and make any corrections before I turned it in. So I think it's really not that intimidating. If you have a project you want to do, there's tons of people who can help you with writing a proposal. Next slide, please. So I can talk a little bit about my research now. So I actually work in a Drosophila lab, so fruit flies. And my project specifically revolves around a protein coding gene called Malvolio. And what this gene does is encode for a metal ion transporter protein, which is also called the Malvolio protein. And when this gene is missing, it causes severe defects in the cuticles and salivary glands of the Drosophila. So over the summer, the questions I tried to answer through my research was where does this protein localize? What type of defects do the mutants actually have? And why is it causing these defects? Next slide, please. So the first thing I was able to do was some protein localization studies through fluorescence microscopy. So I actually took this picture and it looks kind of strange, but it's actually a salivary gland of a fruit fly, just really close up. And I stained it with antibody that is specifically for the Malvolio protein I've been studying. So we can see that it's localizing in these like small vesicle type structures and along the lateral membrane in like these string-like structures. And this was helpful information to have, but we really don't know what these vesicle structures are. So then what I did next, Arman, can you go to the next slide, please? Was co-stain the Malvolio protein with some antibody markers of known organelles. So like in the first picture, I used SG2, which was staining for the endoplasmic reticulum, but you can see that the red and green aren't really overlapping. So we know that like the Malvolio protein is not localizing to the ER, whereas when I used RAB5, which was staining for the endosome, there is a lot of yellow there, which means there's good colocalization. So we kind of hypothesized that Malvolio is working in some sort of endosomal or lysosomal pathway. Next slide, please. Another thing we wanted to do was study what these actual mutations were. So we looked at the Drosophila embryos with the mutants and without the mutants that I collected and made slides of. And if you look at the wild type, it's much longer, and the mouth parts, which I put the arrow right there, it's much darker, whereas in the mutant, it's kind of has stunted growth and lighter mouth parts. Next slide, please. And one of the severe defects we saw was in wild type embryos. They have these rows of like spike-like structures called denticles, whereas in the mutant, they're just completely missing. And these mutants have 2 missing copies of the gene, but if you go to the next slide, we saw that when they had 1 missing copy of the genes, there was holes in the denticles. So it's a less severe defect, but there's still defects being caused. Next slide, please. So like the significance of why I'm studying this protein is that the Malvolio protein has human orthologs called the NRAM family proteins. And there's 2 main ones, NRAM1 and NRAM2. NRAMP 1 has been associated with like immune diseases, Crohn's disease, arthritis, and NRAMP 2 is associated with a lot of neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So it's kind of like the idea that if we understand how this protein works in the Drosophila, it can help us understand it better in humans, and we can help with finding cures or understanding these diseases better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri. Now, I think we have hit the hour. So if you guys have to leave, please feel free to leave. But a couple of us will be here. So stick around and we'll open the floor to questions. So feel free to ask any questions that you may have.
I'm looking. I just want to thank the presenters. What a great job you did. And I think on relatively short notice, right? I think you were just asked and you pulled it together and made some presentations that were really consistent and informative. So I know I really enjoyed seeing that. And I think you all did a beautiful job of representing the various sponsors for your research efforts. I want to apologize to Sri because I hit enter. I was seeding the chat with lots and lots of links for the participants. So don't forget to save the chat because it's got tons of links. But I didn't intend to distract from Sri's presentation. Does anybody have any questions for any of the panelists or for me? I'm happy to answer. And also you can always email if you have any research oriented questions. And of course, you know how to reach each other through your wonderful group if you have questions for your panelists. I guess everybody's armed and ready to take on the research funding world. I'm looking forward to seeing some familiar names in the coming year as folks are applying for various grants and other forms of support.
Well, if no one has any questions, thank you so much for joining us, everybody, today. I'm just going to put all the contacts of our panelists over here if you want to reach out to them. So feel free to take a screenshot. The slides will also be sent out after today. So you'll get that as well, together with the recording. Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Feel free to follow us on social media as well. I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thanks for having us.